Right, just before we crack on with this episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, KS Civils and Groundworks Limited, based in Leeds. They have over 296 years of combined experience in civil engineering and groundworks. Led by Director Carl Smith, their team is known for honesty, reliability and commitment to the highest safety and quality standards. They're proudly ISO accredited and fully CHAS Elite accredited. No matter the size of your project, KS Civils and Groundworks delivers professional, trustworthy service you can rely on. To learn more, visit kscivilsandgroundworks.co.uk. Now let's dive back into this episode. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I've got Peter Bates, Colonel Peter Bates, OBE. He's agreed to come on the podcast. I don't know why he said yeah, but
he's not sure either.
No, it'll be fine. He commissioned into the Royal Artillery in 1979 and had a very, very long career, all the way up until 2013. And he's done a lot for charity and other things like that afterwards, but we'll get on to that later. Hi, Peter, how are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing really well. This is my first ever podcast. I feel a bit sort of new era, modern world. Come on, Peter, stop being so old. If Frankie can do it,
well, yeah,
as well.
It's the way ahead nowadays.
I know.
People aren't listening to the radio.
My 4 children who just podcasted up, they know everything.
Well, it's a great honour to have you on as well. I appreciate it.
I think it's probably more of an honour for me to be on.
And
you can redefine whether it's an honour by the end of this.
I was going to say, let's see what happens.
Up in the bin.
Yeah. Right, so it's the same 5 questions for you that I ask everybody else, which is, where did you grow up? Why did you join? What was it like? Why did you leave? And what have you done since? And we ask where you grew up and why you joined, just to get a bit of a feel of you,
Okay.
And a bit of background, just let the listeners realise that, you're just a normal person, you know what I mean?
Get the listeners to turn off early and say down. Okay, so where did I grow up and all that stuff? Well, way back in 1959, I was born in a place called Hanover. Back in the day, that was called BAOR. Father was in the army, and we moved around in MFO boxes. That's all I can remember for several years. He served in Germany, Malaya, Scotland, London, and so on. So we were moving around with him. So that's the way I grew up. Interesting enough, I think, like many military families, your education is affected. I think I went to 7 different schools before I was 8. Natural reaction, not because I was badly behaved, but maybe because I was badly behaved. Pack him off to boarding school. So at 8, I went off to boarding school. Actually, thoroughly enjoyed it, and did a prep school, and then I went to Lancing College, which is a big public school. And during that time, I had seen my dad doing military stuff. He was a gunner, got to the rank of major. He was into experimentation and proofing of guns by the end. He'd done his regimental service. I can't remember much about that, apart from when he was defending stuff in Malaya, which was just good fun because we only went to school for half the day and swam the rest of the day. But I was only 6 or 7, I think. And so I realised that the army was there. I think that was probably the big thing. And then, of course, when you join, school, you've got the cadets and things like that. And I thoroughly enjoyed shooting. Went to Bisley, liked all that sort of military sort of stuff. And I thought, right, well, what do I want to do with my life? Had O-levels and A-levels and all that sort of stuff. Thought I'd try and go to university. Had a year off before that. We used to call it a year off. It's now called gap year.
Yeah.
I thought, right, well, I might be a teacher or I might join the army. Wasn't sure which. So I spent my gap year in teaching in a prep school in Devon. And what will become apparent later on, it wasn't for me. And during that time, I, applied for the army, did all the normal sort of regular commission board stuff at Westbury. And they said, yep, you can come and join, go to Sandhurst. Oh, but before you do, because the essay you wrote was just so flipping rubbish. We need to send you. But they didn't tell me that, we were, when they said have a few drinks, and then the next day we were writing essays, I thought it was just going to be command tasks and assault course. Oh, easy. But no, there was wretched essays and stuff. So anyway, they said that it's obviously you can't read or write, so we need you to go to a place called Beaconsfield. And before that, I had to go to a place called Woolwich, you can probably remember. So in 1978, I got my joining instructions, Gunner Bates, turn up for Woolwich. They weren't really very understanding because I was on my Interrail pass at the time, so I couldn't really spare them the time at Woolwich. And it's like the letter turns up at home, and when you're on your Interrail, you never want to phone mum and dad. And when I eventually got back, they said, "Oh, by the way, this really important looking letter's there." And when I opened it, said that you should have been at Woolwich a month ago because you've got to learn to march or whatever they teach you at Woolwich as a potential officer. And I had about 2 days left of the course. So I turned up, terribly apologetic, got the old brown suitcase and all the kit and that lovely green Mac, things like that. And did my 2 days at Woolwich instead of 32 days. Marched off to Beaconsfield, had my little RA titles, didn't know how to march. Everybody thought I was a second lieutenant. It was the start of a great career. And at the end of Beaconsfield, I got my place at Sandhurst in January 79. Did the normal standard course and commissioned in August 79. 4th of August. Oh, brilliant. It was one of the best days of my life. Great big party and all the rest of it. And of course, then you face the real world as an army officer.
I mean, Sandhurst, were you prepared for that? Because I mean, I've interviewed guys who they went through. Is it the Rowan troop?
Yeah, Rowan.
Rowan, that's it. Yeah, sorry. Who went through that, and they class themselves as a different breed.
I think they're right to class themselves as a different breed, and you've got to admire someone who gets through the Rowan Company course because it is rather special, and it's cleverly designed from what I remember of it. Because it's someone who either hasn't got or more likely hasn't demonstrated the sort of leadership potential needed to be put onto an expensive Sandhurst course to get commissioned, I think. And so, but they recognise early on that actually with a little bit of encouragement, whatever, i.e. the Row Allen Company, that would do the business. And people have gone through Row Allen prior to joining the standard military course and been absolutely brilliant because of Row Allen. But I didn't do that. I just had to do reading and writing.
I'd never heard of it until I interviewed a few guys, and I don't think it's commonly known.
No, and I think it's still around.
Yeah, I mean, us lower plebs, we don't ever hear about it, really.
What, you were never a staff at Sandhurst? How did yours touch you?
I've done tug of war at Sandhurst. That's about as close to it. Yeah.
Did you win?
No, I think 40 Regiment did that day. Because they did most of the time. Let's not talk about that bitterness.
Okay, sorry.
Sandhurst. I've seen why you always turn up in the regiment and things. And some of them aren't that good, to be honest. And you get the wheat and the chaff and everything like that. But how prepared were you for Sandhurst? Did you? You grew up in the military, so you had a good inkling of what was going to be happening.
I didn't really know that much about the military. My dad, when I said I decided to join the army, he said, "Are you sure?" And he says, "Not just because of me." I said, "Absolutely not." But as a gunner officer, I'd seen that he'd been on lots of different regiments. You've got choice of different equipment. You've got a variety of stuff to do, and it was good because it was technical, but also war fighting. And I thought, no, that's the sort of thing for me. And so it wasn't because of him I joined. More likely, so what preparation did I have? I thought, well, clearly fitness is going to be important. I've done the Beaconsfield, so I've got the tick in the box for academia, rather crawled up to the level of everybody else. And so I blasted the fitness before I went. And I was a school teacher in my gap year, but I was the sports master, so that was easy to keep the fitness level going, and made sure that was all squared away. So when it came to sort of Sandhurst PT, where some people dreaded it, I was actually looking forward to those sort of sessions. And I think most boys love running around in woods and playing, who dares wins and shooting each other and best man falls. I don't really remember that. But, so the whole practical exercising and stuff I absolutely loved, and camping and being outside and what they now call battlecraft, fieldcraft nowadays, grown up words. So I suppose and I was in the cadets briefly at school, but I just loved shooting and things like that. So I don't think there was nothing in my head that made me specifically prepare myself. I just did what I could to make sure that the hard bits were slightly less hard when I got to Sandhurst. And the Sandhurst course was superb because it knocks you down to nothing, builds you up, and by the end of what we had was 6 months, you are all qualified platoon commanders. You should be able to lead a group of 30 men. You should be able to do platoon commander stuff. That's fine, except, of course, I was going to go and join the gunners. And so then you went on to the young officers course at Larkhill, where they say, right, you now need to know about gunnery and ballistics and orbats and stuff like that.
So, I mean, the way yours, I worked at 3-4 back. It was an ERE there for 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
So we come across YOs quite a lot.
So you've seen how the YOs act. Yeah, I get that. Okay.
How they act. I'll tell you what. Let's say Monday morning, whoever's the poor sods on guard has to go back down that road and tail all the guns back to the right way around outside of HQ. And no one ever gets into trouble with that. I know if it was us, if we'd have done it the other side.
Hang on, I think you're probably 20 years out of date. I think people get in trouble nowadays. That's the sad thing about the army.
Nowadays, they wouldn't even do it. That's the real thing.
Well, it might stop me getting to general. I mean, I was surprised I got to lieutenant. There I was, second lieutenant at because half my YO's course were all graduates, so they were that much older, all of one rank senior, and I just turned up, second lieutenant. I mean, it was a good course and it got me ready. But I mean, it was a fun story. So, choosing your first regiment. Do you remember FACE?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, watchers and listeners, if you don't understand FACE or FAME. And I don't suppose it'll ever be, you're going to look it up in Google, but I wasn't so good at FACE, but I was pretty good at FAME. So I concentrated on that because in 2-9 and what was then 4th, the Airborne Regiment, they tended to do, manual computation rather than electronic. And all I wanted to do at that stage was to be a commando, commando gunners. I'd had a chap called Tim Wilton was my was a captain, green-beried captain at Sandhurst, and he was fit and demonstrated all the sort of true values of 2-9. And I thought that's got to be the regiment to go to. That's fantastic because as well as doing all the artillery stuff, by joining the artillery, join the commando regiment, and you're then with the commando brigade and all that sort of stuff. So I thought that was fabulous. And if I couldn't do that, maybe the airborne battery or the airborne regiment in Aldershot. And the postings came out, and there was one place in 4th Regiment, one place in 2-9, and a chap called Bill Moore was on my YO's course, who reached the rank of general, and unlike me, and we both agreed if he put 4th first choice and 2-9 second, and I put 2-9 first and 4th second, and then we beat up anybody else who was trying to get into one of those regiments, then we'd probably get our first choices, and it all worked. So that was quite handy. I then went to 2-9, and the next time I saw Bill was the O group on board ship, both GPOs, before we went to land on Falklands.
Wow. I mean, turning up for 2-9 is, I'll tell you what, here's a question. So, a lot of people I've talked to them and found it, I wouldn't say nerve-wracking, but quite daunting turning up to their regiment for the first time. I mean, you're going to 2-9, you're going to go do the commando course. You're going there as a young officer. There's a lot of expectation from you as well.
I'd agree with all that, yeah.
Did you feel any of that when you turned up there?
So the first thing I had to do was turn up and do the commando course, all arms commando course, as you said. And as a second lieutenant, young, 20, I was on this course with a couple of more senior officers who were older. And I think they're the ones who had a bit more sort of intrepidation because they'd already had a bit of a career and they were a bit older. I mean, I was, used to running around in Sandhurst and doing this, that, and the other, and being shouted at and being told I was a useless person. So I was pretty well prepared, really. And I thought the commando course was fabulous. I mean, a lot of people ask me, because I did P Company as well, which was harder. And all they want to hear, really, is the one that they've done is the hardest. And I look at them in the eyes and look, I did the commando course at 20. I did P Company at 30. Which do you think I found? I felt that the commando course, certainly now looking back at it, they wanted you to pass. They needed you to be green-berried, commando trained, and in their unit. And there was certainly that feel that you got from the All Arms Commando course staff at Lympstone, and certainly the regimental staff that ran the beat up. It wasn't quite the same with P Company staff. You're going to have to really prove you can join us type thing. And so there was a different sort of level of.
There's a different ethos between the commandos and the paras. I think
This is.
They're all very.
You're going to ruin my book. Because,
they're all very special.
You can't. Why is it they argue? They're both really good at what they do. I'm not talking about army commandos and artillery paras. I'm talking about the paras and the Royal Marine Commandos. I mean, they're both really fantastic outfits that do a really good job. They just do it slightly differently.
Yeah.
And, in my view, paras, they've got this task, they're going to bash it straight away, and they're going to just annihilate the enemy, and they're going to achieve it, and they're commanding, whatever it is on that hill straight away. Commandos, they might take some casualties, but they're brave and strong, and they're going to do it. Commandos, well, they might be a bit slower, but they'll think, well, hang on, if we just wait a second and do that, but they still achieve the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think, if I was running the army, which luckily for the army I'm not. I think the fact you've got both mentalities is fantastic. What I can't stand, by the way, listeners, is that there is this rivalry. The commandos aren't trying to be better than the paras, I don't think. And the paras aren't trying to be better. The commandos are the best fighting troops the Navy's got. And in my view, the paras are the best fighting troops that the Army's got.
Yeah.
And why are you trying to prove it all? I was on my jumps course as a fairly senior captain, and there was a bunch of young paras who just finished their P Company. They were 19-year-olds, and they said they were busy chatting, and it was obvious they'd been brainwashed by their in-training platoon sergeant. He said, they're commandos, they're wasters, they can't do anything. They're all surrendered and everything. I said, where did you hear that? I had to, there's a captain to talk to, and I had to put them straight because that was the sort of mentality, which is a pity because youngsters like that needed to know really that you're all working together. And nowadays, you might find yourself in a fob or something, and you've got these people with you, and you need to work together. Life or death.
Strangely for me, I think I was guilty of what a lot of people are guilty of in the forces. You are very insular within your unit. You don't really appreciate what other regiments do and stuff like that because you don't see, especially like working on the guns. You don't see the bigger picture out there. When I started working on the FPC, saying that we're battle group headquarters, I seen it for the first time. Literally for the first time, I was like, Shit, that's how it works.
Yeah,
That's how the engineers come in.
brigade
Yeah,
telling you this, and you're telling
yeah,
the different regiments that, or the batteries that, and you're talking to the other regiments. Absolutely, yeah,
yeah. And you start seeing the bigger picture.
yeah.
And but I mean, the rivalry's got to be there. You know, rivalry's built into everybody in the
Right.
military.
So my view is that you're absolutely right. Rivalry can be massively healthy.
Yeah.
We've both been in regiments where inter-battery rivalry,
Oh yeah.
is fantastic, and it actually the banter and the rivalry tends to make everybody do a little bit better than they would normally. Can't fault it, but I do think you have to be really careful that it doesn't get out of hand. And and I've seen it where rivalry can get out of hand, and I think that's a
Yeah.
shame because I think we all love it, but some people are unaware that it can actually damage.
It can. It really can. Physically damage as well. But I won't go into these stories. Not in
Not on the podcast.
not in a public forum anyway. So I mean, you've got a 2-9. You've done the course.
Yeah.
How did the regiment take to you as being a young officer?
Well, like so many artillery regiments, because your batteries are supporting different units all the time, it was quite rare to have the whole regiment together. And in particular, 2-9 in those days, you had a battery in Arbroath up in Scotland, you had a battery in Poole, and you had two gun batteries in the headquarters in Plymouth. So in effect, you only had about a third of the regiment. Sorry, 2/3 of the regiment where I was living. Which, by the way, viewers, the Royal Citadel, go and visit it if you haven't been there. The best place ever to be billeted as a 20-year-old. Centre of Plymouth. Charles II Castle.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a castle. I mean, living in a castle. I've only been there once.
I don't want to pretend that this ever happened. But can you imagine having a drink downtown?
I know where you're going with that one, yeah.
And it's closing time, but you haven't finished your beer, and she may not have finished her glass of wine. And you and a few other blokes say, well, we do have a bar up at the castle.
That's a fucking line and a half.
We don't need to say anything else.
That's a line and a half.
But I mean, and it's all true. That's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2-9, first regiment, and I had the real pleasure of doing not just 3 years but 4 years. So I was really lucky.
And while you were there, it was that time, the 1982.
Yep. So I'd done, of course, again in Norway, which is fantastic, warfare training, and I'd already done 2 Norway deployments, and by deployment, it's a big exercise, nearly 2 months worth, maybe 3 months, January through to early March, and you're on some form of ship or aircraft carrier or LSL. You arrive, you land, you helicopter, you get cold and wet, you do dry training, and you come back. Prior to that, you've done the Arctic warfare training course where you learn to ski and cope with the cold and all that sort of stuff. So that was all normal jogging for us, as was, battery level exercises at Dartmoor, which was always wet. I don't think it's ever been dry. And, so we were used to it. Helicopters, because there used to be loads in those days, all that sort of normal tactics, deployments, bad weather, and all the rest of it. And we thought we were quite good at it. And what we weren't good at is the big, if we joined a divisional fire plan, we'd had all sorts of problems, probably that thing. So when it came to the Falklands, we just got back from a Norway deployment. Okay, it must have been middle of March. We'd all come back on some aircraft carrier or other. I was on the RFA Sir Drake, that's right, with the guns. And we were unloading. And of course, we were terribly excited because it was last week March and we were all going to go and leave on the Friday. And it was like the Friday before, I think we landed. Anyway, when we got there was like this sort of get the ship unloaded, and then, oh, hold on a minute. And there was this sort of nervousness, and we didn't realise what was going on. And then on the day we were meant to go on leave, 1 week after getting back from Norway, which I love to say is Friday the 1st of April, but I think it was the 2nd, which is a pity. But the CO got everybody in, and the BCs had arrived early. Well, on a Friday. And normally, 12 o'clock parade, don't be naughty, have a great leave, come back. If you've been in trouble, tell the BSM. That's sort of normal.
Yeah.
He said, oh, by the way, leave's cancelled. We're all going to deploy to the Falklands. There's a war on, or there might be. We thought, oh, what have they done up in Scotland then?
Yeah, I was going to say,
Well,
did you think
no,
Scotland?
I had a clue where the Falklands were. But this was all quite, interesting and, exciting and whatever.
What was the atmosphere like?
Well, let me tell you this. I never wanted to go public on this, but I will now because I just feel so relaxed with you, Frankie. That week, I didn't help unload the guns. I was on my pilot's assessment for the Army Air Corps. So I'd previously done Biggin Hill, and I was then on my Middle Wallop thing. I passed Biggin Hill, all that sort of stuff. Turned up at Middle Wallop, did all the final tests, can you do this, can you do that? And passed that. And that was Thursday night. Instead of driving from Middle Wallop, I went to Plymouth. I thought, well, they won't miss me. I'll just pretend it was going next day. So I went home, living near Oxford. Mum and Dad, living at home, blah, blah. And then Friday morning, breakfast with Mum, reading the paper. And she would say, oh, isn't that the sort of thing you lot do? And it was talking about a boat going, being an aircraft carrier, going down to the Falklands, or up to the Falklands at that stage. Yeah. And I said, oh, yeah. And then I get a phone call on, because it was only landline that days. My CPO, you. I said, oh, well, there's a bloody oak group, Oh, sorry. So instead of going on leave and hanging on a day and admitting I was able, I got in the car and I just, went hell for leather to get down to Plymouth in time. Got slowed down by the police on the M5 or wherever it was. But I was in uniform and he was so sweet. Can you say that about police? Being sweet. Yeah. So understanding. He was so understanding. Yeah. He said, sorry, so you were speeding. I said, I know, I'm late for the war. And he said, if you could just keep to the speed limit, But I'll tell you what, I'll get you past this blockage. And so I got to Plymouth. And no one had really missed me at that stage. And we had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I think, in order to get ready. Oh, hello. When you last deployed, PDT? 3 months, 4 months, 6 months?
Yeah.
We had those 5 days, half of which was a weekend. And if you're in Plymouth at the weekend, you have to go to the pub. So, the problem with that was if you go to a pub early April 1982 in Plymouth, and they say, how's your weekend? You say, I can't tell you. I said, we know that. We know that. I'm not allowed to tell us, but we know. Have another free beer. It was just the most amazing. And so there we were packing our boat. In my case, it was the RFA Sir Drake, which we'd recently been on anyway, because we'd just come back from Denmark previous to Norway. And we were packing it all up. And that week, I got promoted from CPO to GPO. Great move. Senior Lieutenant, woof. And, my GPO's course, BRO's course, whatever they call it in New Money, was going to be after the Easter leave. Because obviously I didn't know what to do. Great. And so there I was doing this. And I thought, right, okay. And because I was the GPO, I was the senior bloke. We had GPO and a CPO, and about 80 lads. Some fantastic senior NCOs and war officers, BSM, 2 TSMs, all going down south with us on our boat. But I was meant to be sort of in charge of them. Meanwhile, the BC had it easy with his 2 FOO teams and his BK. We didn't have BKs in those days. He was an FOO on the Canberra, and they were getting ready to go as well. And I thought, right, well, what are we going to do? We weren't sure whether we'd deploy, but we knew we would go a long way down there, and then Margaret Thatcher would decide, and we'd be sitting around in the Ogden, being sick and stuff like that. So I thought, right, we need to get as much, training equipment. We need, pens, paper, overhead projectors, all that sort of stuff. And then we thought, VHS videos were quite new at that stage. And on board ship, they had VHS and all that stuff. So I thought, right, we need films. So I went on Plymouth Sound radio and said, look, can't tell you where we're going, but we're going away for a long trip. We've got nothing to do in the evenings. So if anybody's got any videos to donate, could they? Blimey. Guardian of the Citadel, absolutely, the bucket loads, car loads, Land Rover fulls of VHS tapes. So I then loaded them all on my boat, which was a brilliant idea in the end. Perfect. Because our boat, or I, then became the sort of VHS. And VHS sounds so boring and old-fashioned now, but it was actually state of the art, keep people busy for 2 hours.
You turned into blockbusters.
I was the new Mr. Blockbusters. And you get mail and important messages and things moving around the fleet by light helicopter each day. And they would also request to the librarian a film. I'd written this thing out, photocopied it. You can ask for these films. And so I was the librarian loaning all these films, not the whole fleet, but what it's like. So that was quite fun. Obviously, meanwhile, RFA Sir Drake, we had pick of the films. Well, when do I do Mutiny on the Bounty? And all these different, and it was quite good fun, and we did all sorts to keep people busy and their minds off what might happen, but at the same time get them ready for what probably would happen. We had quite inventive as to what we did. So on Canberra, they made a puff range, and things like that.
Yeah.
On our ship, we did firing off the back of the flight deck, pulling dummies to shoot at, radio procedure, Morse code learning, all the sorts of things we could think of. And then you'd speak to your mate in another boat, what are you doing with your blokes, and this and the other, so that we could then compile some sort of training program from nothing, as some Buckshee lieutenant and second lieutenant and BSN tiers then throwing this program together. And, fitness as well, crucial. And so we were, running around the flight deck, boring, and things like that. So we were doing a lot of stuff like that.
Did you do any gunnery dry firing on there or anything? No.
The only time we did, I don't think we did any gunnery. Because that's the other thing. So the night before we left, 2 nights before left, some air defenders arrived in the Citadel, T Battery, Chartreuse troop, brilliant blokes. They all turned up. Of course, they didn't have the right colour berry, but we still welcomed them. And they were going to be on the RFA Sir Drake with me, as was my adjutant and his FDC, a chap called Keeling, who was CRA one div, you may have noted. Anyway, John Keeling.
The name rings a bell.
And so we had some of the regimental headquarters, my battery and T Battery. And I thought, right, there are 4 gun batteries going down south. 7 battery, 8 battery, my battery, 7-9 battery, the junior battery of 2-9, and 4th field, 2-9 battery with Bill Moore, the para battery. And I thought, right, well, it's a bit juvenile, so you might want to cut this. But I thought...
It's definitely staying in there.
So for regimental history, so battery history, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we deployed first? Okay. So I said, look, I'm happy, and I explained it to the guns number ones. I said, I'm happy for us to stay on the top deck where you're getting, soaked. The guns were getting wrecked with salt water and all that stuff, and they were chained down, all that sort of stuff. But there was method to my madness, because that meant T batteries, sensitive rapier stuff, and Land Rovers, and we're all tucked up in bed underneath in the dry bit of the underneath dock. But it meant we had to do like triple the maintenance on the thing. And particularly when we did all the offload and onload, I made sure we were still on top when we left Ascension, which then meant, because we had a thing called the FDC on board, which was crucial to go ashore the moment there were 2 batteries, well, before there were 2 batteries ashore, they couldn't get off until I got off. Ooh. So the junior battery of 29 was the first battery to land on the Falklands. We were also the only gun battery at that stage ever to deploy to the Ascension Island. So they said, right, well, we need to sort this out. So I said, well, look, let us have a training session. We'll all go to the Ascension Island. So they picked up the guns, dropped them at the Ascension Island. We parked on the airport. It meant some blokes had a whole day and night on land after 2 months of throwing your guts up at Bay of Biscay and all the rest of it, and which was a bonus. And then we had a day where we could go running and swimming and stuff. But then when we came back, top deck. So by the time we got down, the decision was easy for the powers to be to say which battery was first off.
And what was it like actually turning up there when you realised that the shit was going to hit the fan?
Well, that was interesting because you'll hear lots of people's views on this, but you still weren't sure. You weren't sure. And then, of course, there was the Coventry and the Belgrano and things like that. So as you got closer, you thought, right, do you know what? The politicians have got this. And I think we all, certainly I did, we had faith in Margaret Thatcher, who was, dead straight and really determined. And so there was a period where we thought, yeah, it's definitely happening. And then, of course, the op order came out and we realised, and there was this, sensational O group on board one of the ships where we all looked at each other and thought, shit, this is really happening. And you heard what's happening, you think, okay, fine. And off we go. Oh, hang on a minute. I've never done a recce before. You said it on the YOs, but not from a Gazelle. Oh, so that was a bit of a added bonus. And there was a fair amount of worry around. And actually, one of the ways of demonstrating that worry, soldiers aren't going to say that worry. Just it's not part of the ethos, is it? We just crack on. And if your training's good, you're going to be good. But I was going to church weekly. There was a small church service, so there were about 3 of us. One of them was the priest on board ship. And as we got a bit closer and it got a bit more obvious, 10 more people. And on the last church service, which was about the day before, there was standing room only. Suddenly you had all these people who thought, well, I don't believe in God, but, just in case.
Just in case, yeah.
It was all sort of insurance policy stuff. And they do say, American phrase, but you get no atheists in foxholes. And I think people started realising that it was time to come clean with things and say, right. And at that stage, you wanted as much protection as good. You had your training, you had each other, you had your air defence, and you knew what you were going to do. But, if you pull in a bit of extra cover from somewhere, like an insurance policy, why not? So that was all going on. And then the D-Day at dawn, it was surreal. We're there in the galley and we've all got, cammed up and that stuff. And a couple of lads have got ace of clubs in their webbing helmet, which I had no idea what it was all about. Apparently it's a Vietnam thing. I'm still not too sure what it means, but anyway, looked really cool. So we've got loads of pictures of all that. And suddenly there was not so many people smiling. And I think that all changed from about 48 hours before we knew it was happening, when it was time to pack your kit. And this time we weren't packing for exercise. People were given live grenades. People were giving live ammunition. Everything got heavier. Everything got really, obviously, more in your face. This is for real. And I think one of the things that really dawned on me then, as a young 23-year-old lieutenant, was I had some absolutely terrific senior NCOs, thankfully. And one or two of them would say, been in the army 20 years, and it's all been about today. This is why I've done this stuff. All that training for 20 years, and now I'm going to prove that it was worth it. You thought, shit, good point. And that was like the pinnacle of their career. They were going to do it. And they were fantastic. Every single member of 7-9 Kirky Commander Battery was fabulous. And I was still very young and excitable. D-Day, we were going off, my recce party, myself and Bombardier Wilson, who was a senior chap, smoked a pipe. And such a character. Quiet, unlike me. And he was my, would it be survey sergeant? Something like that. Anyway, whoever GPO Zach or something anyway. And so we were in the first helicopter at H hour or whatever, H hour on 21st of May to leave the ship. And as we went up, still dark, and I don't know whether you're aware, but Fanning Head was still, blasting away. The special forces were busy getting rid of whoever was on there. And you thought, oh, hang on a minute. There we are in a dark, sort of bouncy, watery bay, and there's this real live fighting going on just over there, and we're going to land somewhere over there. Don't worry, I'm a recce officer. Got my map. I know where to go. And off we, and the really senior captain, Royal Marine pilot, he was head of the flight. He was visibly nervous. I was visibly excited. And I turned around to Bob and Wilson and said, right, let's have a race. First person to put their foot down here is the winner and all that sort of stuff outside. He said, okay, sir, yeah, not interested in that game. Anyway, so we got there, did the recce, seemed to remember what to do, put my gun markers, and I had a little Instamatic camera. And then my protection party arrived at Seeking, found out, all ready to go. And I thought, Mr. Bates, what are you doing taking pictures? Capturing the moment, and the guns. But I mean, sadly, the next two Gazelles after mine got shot down, and then the fourth and fifth were the other two more GPOs. So our regiment was quite lucky in a way, and where we landed was pretty safe. We didn't know it at the time, and we had 4-2 Commando ahead of us and things like that. So it was all still quite surreal because you're 23, you're in a war zone, you've got a job to do, you know your orders, and there we were, centre of arc, guns ready, yeah, report ready, we were the first battery ready, so we meant a lot in those days.
Yeah.
And then we left it at that. And okay, start digging, and let's get some trenches. And so fire mission battery came down to a different battery. I won't name them. And I thought, oh, hello. This is a bit like regimental camp. Look, lads, lock and load on this one. Let's and I reported ready illegally. I can't remember how you do it all, but it was on the regimental net, but not to me. And as it happened, that battery that was meant to be covering that area wasn't able to or wasn't ready. Whereas, despite the disgruntled people who just put cam nets up, and a switch the centre of arc. We then reported ready first and got the fire mission. C-sub, 7-9 battery. First, Gunner Jones, number 3. First to fire the light gun in anger ever. And then the battery took out a machine gun nest that had been taking out the Gazelles. So I then rushed down to the gun, grabbed the cartridge case, hot at my hand, stuck it in the Bergen, stayed in my Bergen for the rest of the war, got home, presented it to the regiment, and the CA said, oh, another first round fired. Bastards.
I wonder how many of them ended up on eBay.
Yeah, anyway. So, so the war was a massive part of my early career. I mean, some fantastic stories. I've got to tell you one of them is that, when you're a land soldier and you've been bobbing about in the Ogden for so long, you're so relieved to hit the deck and have proper ground under your feet. And not many of us had ever been attacked by aircraft. And when there's dogfights and aircraft coming in and you're strapping this, that, and the other, and bombs, it's all a bit, oh my God, what's going on? So quite naturally, we had LMGs in those days, one per gun, BSM seemed to have his own for some reason. Anyway, so in our trench, we had LMGs. We were also firing at these things. And that evening, because the first evening we were attacked, but that evening, GPO's job, reports and returns. And you're saying how everything is, blah, 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 and you give an ammunition return, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember all the details, sorry. And there I am reading it out. It was only as I read it out, I realised what I was saying about number of link and magazines and ball, and then the number of, because half of us had half of the battery had SMGs. The amount of 9mm that was used up, firing into the air 50 metres, and then dropping down. And John Keeling, the adjutant, said, right, yeah, thanks, great, and great effort today, blah blah. But maybe calm down on the 9mm anti-aircraft firing. But at that stage, when you've been pent up and you've suddenly seen the enemy for the first time, it was a completely natural thing to do, and we all just blasted into the air. Once we felt we were responsible for getting one of the cars down, or Scar, although 4-2 claimed it. But then we adopted a thing where everybody, if there was aircraft, everybody would fly in the same place, directly over the battery centre. So you had this cone effect. So if they were to fly through it, you'd be more likely to get them. But they're pilots. Wow, bravery. We could see the whites of their eyes. They were coming down over Bomb Alley and stuff. So.
It's crazy, I mean, I've spoke to guys before, and the Pucara pilots and stuff. The dude, it's always mentioned how brave they were. All right, they were the enemy. All right, you've still got to have a bit of respect for the guys who were doing it.
Yeah, and also, I mean, our Harrier pilots as well. Even though
phenomenal. Yeah, phenomenal.
And I think war probably brings out the worst and the best in people. But when you see a Harrier jet chasing an Argentinian plane, or a Rapier missile, following a Skyhawk who's panicking and trying to shake it off, and then it takes the wing out and it blows up, your natural reaction isn't think there's another dead pilot, there's another plane going down. It's, well, yeah, got it. Yeah. It's like sort of watching a boy's Victor comic strip in front of your own eyes. And that was, I've reflected back on that, and I thought it's a shame I didn't have the maturity to think the bigger picture. But when you're in that situation, I don't think you can be blamed. And seeing what happened, and and every time one of them got shot down, it meant there was less chance that something would happen to us. I mean, the first day they dropped bombs near the brigade headquarters, which was only about a kilometre from us. I was doing something private in a small dip in the ground, further about 100 yards from the gun position, and bombs came down, and there was a shudder, and I thought, shit, they've hit the gun position. Anyway, trousers up, rushed back, and found it wasn't R. But that's where a couple of guys in a trench at brigade headquarters got killed on, I think, day one. So it brought the whole thing, the reality. And I think nowadays we send our soldiers and our units far more prepared. But don't forget, this was something that a sergeant had trained for 20 years. The last proper war was the Korean War. And, people have done Northern Ireland, but that's very sort of brick-orientated, probably just as dangerous, I expect. But the long and short of it was we were remarkably well ready, considering, and I think the regiment, proved themselves, and you could quite easily have tripped up, and it could have been a disaster. I mean, I think everybody proved themselves, from the cabinet making decisions through to the MOD, through to sort of brigade headquarters, down to every single soldier. And at the end, they came up to me and said, right, okay, honours and awards. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, your medals. I said, oh. I had no idea that there'd be a campaign medal for a start, because people didn't know about medals in those days. And they said, well, do you want to write anybody up? I said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, because it's a normal thing now, but genuinely, in those days, it wasn't that well known, and certainly to me, at my young age. And the adjutant was saying, well, if anybody done really well, they might get a citation or MID or some sort of award. I said, well, everybody did really well. There wasn't a single bloke who didn't go above and beyond. So what do you mean? And he said, well, okay, as an example, we'll probably get an allocation of this number of MIDs, this number of citations. I said, oh, okay. So in my newly formed Beaconsfield handwriting, I wrote up as many people as I could. My REME Staff Sergeant Haller, really lovely, super chap, because all the REME detachment was spread around the guns. He he rescued a gun. The balancing springs had broken, but he managed to fix it with his Leatherman. Oh, no, we didn't have them. It was an army penknife. He did the most phenomenal job. And as well as doing all the Remy stuff, he also did gunnery stuff and this, that, and the other. So I wrote him up, and I was delighted because he got a commander's accommodation, I think.
As did yourself, didn't you?
Well, two of the 4 GPOs got MIDs, well deserved. Maybe because I was the youngest, I didn't. I'm not sure. But I think everybody deserved everything, and therefore, maybe everybody should have got nothing. I don't know. I mean, there was Willie McCracken who got his MC, superb. I can tell you a story about him on Longdon. But yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate. I got a Commander in Chief's commendation, but it wasn't for me. It was for the battery. And
generally, they are, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I joined in '85, and I remember doing my gunnery training at Bramco, and they'd take us into the hangar, and there was a load of ammo crates, ammo boxes in the corner of the hangar, and I'll always remember it. And they said, look at that, and we were like, yeah, all this young sprogs like, yeah, what's that then? They said that's how much ammunition was fired in the Falklands and we were like, fucking hell. And initially it didn't mean nothing to me until you got a bit more knowledgeable. I mean, there was a lot.
That's quite a sad thing as well, because obviously financial constraints don't allow you to train with the amount of ammunition.
No.
And actually, another job I had in the MOD was the AS-90 turret trainer, which I brought into service. That allowed you, to do burst fire and things like that. But it's still not real, because you haven't got the noise, you haven't got the cordite, you haven't got everything else. But of course, in the Falklands, we were firing thousands of rounds. Barrels were getting hot. Guns were sinking into the mud. It was crazy. To the extent that you come back from something like that. We had a change of CO, had a bit of leave, and then we went on practice camp. Right, okay, practice camp. Oh, the enemy, yeah, they might turn up. Okay, chaps, the enemy might turn up. Make sure you stay on stag. Oh, we're going to fire a fire mission. That'll be 2 rounds, fire for effect.
Yeah.
What are we on? But of course, it is what it is. But, talking about the firing, I mean, our gun numbers were just incredible. When it came to the big battles, in my case, Longdon, and then Two Sisters and Goat Ridge, it was crucial that everything was no safety officers or anything like that. And it was absolutely critical that everything was done perfectly, or as perfectly as you could in those conditions. Laying, all that survey, everything. And old Willie McCracken, he was the NGFO with 3 para. I was helicoptered into the middle of 3 para, just behind Mount Longdon. We had a company on each side, and disastrous recce. Anyway, eventually the guns arrived, and as I arrived at a recce party, 155 shell bursting over the 3 para position, and I hit the deck and got as low into the mud as I could. I looked around, and I was being stared at by paras who'd been having this all day. And, unfortunately for the Argentinians, I think they weren't observing the fire, probably because their observers the SNSS, well, I'll take warfare card and take them out. But they knew roughly where 3 para were, but they, of course, with, the wrong height, didn't matter. It was like tinsel coming down. And, I didn't know that. It was bloody noisy. It was scary. But once I got up and I was wet and muddy from then onwards, I realised it wasn't quite so bad. Anyway, the guns all came in. And so we had Colonel Hugh Pike from 3 para and a chap called John Patrick, who was BC Headquarter Battery 4th Regiment, but ex-proper airborne artillery, who'd come in as the extra BC to help 3 para. And a whole bunch of FOOs from different places were with 3 para. And they set off, and they were going to do Longdon. And at one stage, we watched this battalion snake set off in the daytime towards Lloyd, because you could, obviously, guns perfectly positioned on a reverse slope, but you went up to the front gun, look over, and there you could see Longdon. You had these sort of ants wandering around, obviously Argentinians on their position, and three para obviously on their way. I hadn't realised that it was time for them to attack it or whatever. And then a gazelle whops into the gun position, and it's Brigadier Gillian Thompson and my CO, Holroyd Smith. And Brigadier Thompson said, where's Colonel Pike? I said, I just seen him walking with his battalion that way. He said, oh my God. And he didn't have a radio, and neither did Holroyd Smith. So he used my radio to talk to the battery commander, normal backup comms and all the rest of it, and said, get your asses back here because it's too dangerous to go, da, 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 da. So Hugh Pike, who didn't like that sort of thing, I don't think, then had to bring three para back. I don't think he ever found out it was my radio, otherwise I might be in trouble. But when they did attack, we went to the O Group, and, there you are, as a lieutenant. I had chums from Sandhurst who joined the parachute regiment. They were now platoon commanders. And I was thinking, shit, you are going to be the lead platoon of the lead company on this battalion attack. And you think, crikey, that is pretty hard work and pretty damn scary. So all that was going on, and CO briefed us what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, extra ammunition, blah, blah, blah. And as a GPO at that stage, I didn't really have a job. Because CPO, gunline section commanders, gun number ones, they were doing everything. And a GPO would normally be dashing off on a new recce. Well, I'm not going anywhere. And so I adopted myself as a bit like a spare safety officer, morale officer, checking the technicality of the whole thing and things like that, making sure that things were absolutely exact, because one stray round would have been devastating.
I was going to say most of the missions there would have been like danger close.
Well, this is the point in question. I mean, there was meant to be rolling barrages and things like that, and we had recorded the targets and things like that, so there was a proper fire plan. And then halfway through, William McCracken gets on the radio and says, "Fetch Sunray," or whatever I'm called, Seagull, I think, wasn't it, GPO, back in the day?
I can't remember.
Anyway, fetch me. And he said, and in his beautiful Irish accent, he said, "We got a bit of a problem here." Can't do the Irish accent. And the whole battalion was being pinned down by a 120 millimeter recoilless rifle, going up the thing. Can't imagine how awful it was, but there they were. He said, "I'm going to have to try and take it out. So do us a favour, Peter. Make sure they really act." I said, "Do what I can, sir." And so we then explained to the gun numbers, this is really critical, get everything right. And we did a tiny bit of firing so he could then pinpoint. It was in the middle of the night, mind, with bullets flying around. And every time he'd transmit, I was ducking because of the noise at the other end. It was just...
Yeah.
And eventually, thanks to Willie, we were able to take out the recoilless rifle. It then continued the advance for three para. And that was one of the reasons, along with a few others, that he got his MC.
Well deserved as well.
Yeah. So, and then we moved after that, and CO came and said, "Well, no, what are you?" And then we moved to another position. We then supported the next final attack. And then at the end, we thought, phew, white flags, great. What do we do now? Because your adrenaline from the 21st of May till the 12th of June, it was just pumping. And outdoors every day, all night, on your tender hooks and things like that. And we thought, and where our gun position was, it was an old refueling place for Argentinian, I can't name my dog, Argentinian aircraft, helicopters. And they'd left all this ammunition. And because 8 Battery had done their fantastic thing at Goose Green, they had nicked a whole bunch of Argentinian weapons and they shared it because we didn't have enough LMGs. So we had extra machine guns and all the spare ammunition. And so we set up the best shooting day ever. You've got as many rounds as you can possibly fire with these Argentinian and your own weapons. And you had ball and tracer and stuff that burns, whatever that's called, incendiary and all that. And we had this range on the side of the gun position the VSM organised. It was a really clever way of releasing, that pent up, oh my God, it's all over. which I think was absolutely superb.
Gives a bit of finality to it, yeah.
And also, we were left there because, of course, all the people like Brigade Headquarters, FTC, they came, war's over, we'll rush forward to Stanley. Meanwhile, the gun batteries just waited their turn and eventually got to Stanley.
I mean, I'd heard rumours, we're told that, in junior leaders, that you nearly ran out of ammunition. You were very, very close to expending all ammunition, really.
Yeah, I ought to know the detail of that. In my case, we were resupplied just in time, and we did not run out of ammunition. We could have fired for another half a day easy. But I mean, ammunition.
So what was it like coming back from there then? Coming home?
Oh, okay. Do you remember the old 2066?
Yeah.
Confidential report books?
Yeah.
Well, I had about 100 of those to write. So I was sitting on HMS Fearless, I think it was. And we did PT in the morning, and basically we were just told to relax. 3 big meals, bar in the evening, sunshine for half the journey on the, sunbathing. And I thought, oh, perfect. So it was the first time in my life I've actually done all the 26/6s on time. And it was so easy to write, Gunner Summers was the most amazing gun limber driver. He did this and this. Outstanding, in every aspect. It was just easy to write about everybody because they were in your mind, in your heart for that period of time so vividly. And so it's a really clever, easy way of doing it. So, so the way back, am I allowed to stand up and get you
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, C-sub, Gunner Jones, firing first round ever by the light gun in anger. Okay, now we're moving back to your question on what did we do when we get back? Well, what we did on the way back was all sorts of fun things on HMS Fearless and things like that. And on the way down, we had done a bit of a technical experiment to see if we could do anti-ship fire with the light gun, real rounds against other ships, if that needed to happen. And we worked out that, we could, but it would probably make the biggest hole in the flight deck ever. So it was probably a bad idea, and we didn't practice it. Anyway, you've heard of the crossing of the line ceremony?
Yes. I was going to ask you that happened.
Okay, so one of the big events that broke up the weeks that we got, I can't remember when we got back. It must have been 3 weeks later or something. We were sailing back. Crossing the line ceremony, we'd all done it before, but this was another big one. And I was chatting to the guys on Fearless and said, well, we could mark it like a royal salute, bang as we cross it and bang after we've crossed it.
Cool.
in good royal salute behaviour, you've got
I was going to say kneeling country, brilliant.
All the perfect gun numbers. Note the Navy and bad rig and the Sea Kings. Well, I don't know whether you've ever been on an aircraft carrier or a LPD, as that is. But the smell of AVTA, aviation fuel, is very, very prominent. And we thought, right, we won't fire a shell. We didn't have any blanks. So I thought, that's all right. We'll just fire a cartridge, which won't make that much noise, but the charge bags will make a bit of noise. All thought it was a good idea. I don't think SMIGs had been invented then. If they were, they weren't. I didn't have any in my battery. So we thought, right, okay, so we had these charged 3 or whatever it was, loaded in each gun. Start the line. Number 1, fire. And there was and that's not even captured it properly, but the largest flame ever with burning charge bag stuff floating back in. And people thinking, wow, that's good. No one, I think, other than me, thinking the AVTA, which is just hanging there near the hangar and the helicopters, could ignite at any minute. And in 1 minute's time, I'm going to say fire again. Should I? I thought, in for a penny. 18-year-old, career's been all right, been a bit of fun. So bang, and we got away with it. So and nothing blew up, and Fearless eventually got to Plymouth, which was fantastic. And that's the other thing. We at the end at Endex, as it were, in Stanley. Half my seniors were ex pack howitzer gunners, and the Argentinians had pack howitzers, and there was quite a few pack howitzers left lying around. Some of them brand new, and so we thought we'd take some of them back. And we checked with the Navy. Yep, we can load them. House to be. So we picked up, I think, 3 or 4 pack howitzers, added them onto the BVs, towed them in. And eventually some bigwig said, no, you can only take 2, you can't take 4. And we were totally disappointed. BSM then told me to go for a walk. You know what that means. And then I came back and we only had 2. Because, of course, his blokes could take it into I think it's 34 different bits you can break it down to. Anyway, so the BVs were a little bit lower down on the ground and they just pulled 2 guns in. And we loaded up these guns onto the flight deck. And about a day later, there was not 2, but there were 4 of these pack howitzers.
It's multiplied.
So the other thing we did for a bit of fun, I organised a gun race. I mean, I'd been to Devonport. I'd seen the proper gun teams doing their stuff, where they do it over the ravine and all that sort of thing. The roll tournaments. I thought, well, we could do that. So I organised a ex-Navy gun team personnel versus my seniors versus my junior ranks. 3 teams, each with a pack howitzer. They'd had a bit of time to practice, and they had to do the same thing: strip it, get it over a wall, get it over there, pretend to fire it, strip it, bring it back. So we had, gun race practice on board the deck, which was an interesting diversion.
I can imagine.
Thinking, it's the 26 sixes by then probably. And then we got into to Plymouth and helicoptering everything off, including the pack howitzers. And of course, we didn't really know how to rig them up. And what Prince Philip saw at the Royal Citadel with all our guns flying off, and then the pack howitzers flying off, and one pack howitzer with its barrel pointing straight down. Well, who gives a shit, So all of that, and it was that was the first time I think it dawned on me that this was quite a big thing. I mean, you'll have heard, and our parents knew that they were reading about it in the paper and it was on the news. I mean, we just thought it was another thing, and we didn't think anybody would know we'd been away. But then to have the Queen's husband waiting for you in your own regimental camp. I mean, my mum was beside herself. The whole thing was fantastic. Spilt champagne because she was laughing so much. So the return to the Citadel was absolutely awesome.
It sounds it. It absolutely sounds it. Yeah, I can imagine as well.
I've gone on about that far too long. Blimey. Sorry.
Not long enough. I could have listened to that forever.
That's 4 years. I've got another 40.
If it gets that long, we can always do a part 2. So I mean, that leads me on then. So you've gone from the Falklands, you're back to the unit, and you mentioned earlier that you'd gone airborne as well.
Yeah. So I didn't want to go to anywhere, but I wanted to stay in Plymouth. I mean, Plymouth was the social centre of the world, as far as I was concerned, according to this 23-year-old. It was bloody good. And the 3 Brigade Air Squadron Gazelles were in Plymouth, and that's my aim: go to Middle Wallet, qualify as a helicopter pilot, go back, keep the green lid, do 2 years flying in. Might take a GPO and a recce, you never know. And so that was my aim. So I went to Middle Wallet after 2-9, and I mean, I'm not particularly clever at many things, but one thing I'm really bad at is landing a chipmunk. And I got angry with the instructor, who was an ex-Spitfire pilot, and we had a massive argument in the air, and I just, it didn't work. So that bit of bad behaviour, I got chucked off the course. Never went solo, and it was such disappointment because I'd done all the sort of tests and everything.
Yeah.
But I was up there with people who, I was born to fly. well, all I wanted to do was be back in Plymouth. So it probably wasn't the right incentive. And so they sent me to Germany, and I joined 2-7 Regiment, and actually got my Germany tick in the box, if you like. M109, nuclear gun. It was a 4.9 battery, which had been travelling around the circuit for a bit. But it was great because I did Battus as a GPO, I did Battus as a FOO, back in the days when we used live rounds the whole time. It was terrific. I met the Queen when she came over. CEO, had me as his project manager for that. I did the ski trip, cross-country skiing, Army pentathlon, Army triathlon. I mean, it was a ball. I wasn't overly impressed with gunnery, because I think felt that light gun gunnery was so epic, and I was a bit tunnel vision on that. And then I said, right, if I can't go to a light gun regiment, then I don't really like it in Germany. Maybe I should try Hereford or something. Went to have a look at Hereford, looked far too scary, and everyone looked really old. And so because they do a potential officers briefing course, which I went on, and they said things like, if you're not absolutely sure, don't even try. So I didn't try. And but they sent me to 7RHA, which was para at that stage, and really from that moment onward, I've stayed airborne artillery, because I did my troop commander FOO there. I then worked as the TA battery, which was attached. I did brigade headquarters in 5 Airborne Brigade, and then I went back as a battery commander. So most of the time in 7. Loved it.
I mean, you mentioned earlier about P Company, and you basically didn't, and I'm not going to ask you, but we've already gone over that. And the ethos of the people. I mean, I've worked with guys from 7th, I've worked with guys from 2-9, especially when I was down in 3-4 battery, and the closest I probably got to them was when working with I was on the regimental tug of war team, and I kind of proved to the guys from 2-9 on the team and the guys from 7th on the team, I kind of proved to them that they weren't the biggest animals in camp, let's say.
Yeah.
So I think they were quite shocked at us normal flatties and us crap hats were just as... We could cause as much mayhem as they could.
You've got your special talents in other things. And I think that's key. Because, if you are an advanced signaller in 2-9, and you can do VHS, HF, or whatever it is nowadays, and you're limited really to just brigade ops, then you're going to be quite good at it, because that's all you do. But then suddenly you change regiments and you're in a divisional fire plan. I mean, that is totally different. So I think that we tended to have the mentality that might have constrained some of our thought. We thought we were great, and I think we were, but probably a bit naively didn't see the bigger picture. Did that matter? Not sure, because as long as if your morale is high, you're going to do well. And I think in both units, morale was exceptionally high, because you felt you'd earned your place to do that, and you were doing something a bit different, and you were with like-minded people. But I think it was a shame if you started thinking that other people weren't there to support you. And I think most cases the maturity would have kicked in, and they realised that we're all one army and so on. And people
one thing I found with 3-4 battery, of all places, and I mean, let's tell the truth as it is. Most people end up in 3-4 battery because the regiments don't want them there with the regiment.
I don't agree with you. Sorry, Frankie. I think that's half the reason.
Yeah.
And back in the day, I remember we used to send all the trouble people to EREs. And then they changed that. They said, look, if you do an ERE, you can be promoted out of it when you come back, or something. I'm out of date. And then particularly 3-4, we felt, mainly 7, because I didn't know what I was doing in 2-9, but probably the same in 2-9. If you send the right person, he's going to identify somebody in training that he can then say, look, come for a run with me. Come to the gym, do some extra push-up. Have you thought of being a commander or a para? And that actually was enormously helpful to recruiting into those particular regiments.
I mean, the thing I found about 3-4 battery, I was there 2000 to 2000. Well, 99 to 2001. So I missed out on Kosovo and stuff like that. You had, as we used to call it, all the reprobates from the regiments. From all the regiments there in one group, and they work better together than I've seen regiments work together.
Well, that could have been the leadership of the senior NCOs around them.
I think it was a bit of everything. There was a lot of rivalry between gun subs because, like A sub would be mainly from, say, 2-6, and B sub would be mainly from 4th and stuff like that. So there was rivalry there between the gun subs as well the troops. I ended up in C troop with the OPs. I'd never been on the OPs in my life. I ended up in
they said it was obvious.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll spill the beans on my first date at 3-4 battery. All right, we were going out on the area. I said, right, you're going to C troop. I was like, what's C troop? What's the difference? I thought I was coming here to do CP work. And said, no, you're going on one of the food parties. I was like,
as a signaller.
As a signaller. Yeah. 2 guys from 7th. The Yak on there, the full screw was 148 battery.
Okay.
And another guy from 29, and then me who had nothing. I'd run to the stores, get my webbing and everything, put it together, go out on the area. As I was walking over to the OP, the webbing had rushed together. It was starting to fall apart and bits falling off. And they just looked at me and they went, "Brig the BV in the back of that Land Rover. Come for the kettle on." That'll be great. See you later. Just sat in the back making brews all day.
Did you graduate?
Yeah. I enjoyed my time at 3-4 Barry. And I
think going back to what we talked about earlier, I think it's critical for training anyway, but for units that don't get out and about much, like 297, having exposure and seeing and allowing them A, to be seen, but B, to see other units, when they come back to their regiment, it's not all about my regiment. I understand that there's some good quality elsewhere. And so that's quite healthy.
I mean, the other thing I think it gives the regiment's benefit is that the guys have been there for 2 years doing gunnery day in, day out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Getting very, very good at their trade and then going back. I mean, I'm talking even gunners, Lance Bombardiers, they're going back to their units where they've had more training in the last 2 years than a regiment's probably going to have in 10 years.
No, I agree. Yeah.
And they push that in there. I mean, so we'll go back. We'll go to you taking over as BC in 7RHA. So that was your first big command, really, was it?
Yeah. Well, 100 blokes on corporate was quite big, but when I was keen.
I didn't mean size. I meant responsibility.
Yeah, responsibility.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. By then, it was the first time I had a responsibility as a major. I was actually keen to go back to 29 because I loved it so much, and I thought BC 29 can't beat it. So that was my first choice. I got 7, which was a fantastic choice as well. Very grateful. And in retrospect, I think whoever it is that decides did the right thing, because as a troop commander FOO, I knew everybody.
Yeah.
In fact, I had half my food party as my BC's party because we'd all sort of graduated up. And it made the leadership management, call it what you like, of the blokes a lot easier for me because I'd known them before, which I wouldn't have had in 2-9 because the gap would have been too big. So I think I benefited a lot from that. I mean, I had some pretty hefty shoes to fill because the other battery commanders at G Battery, there'd been people like Paddy Duncan. I handed over to a chap called Julian Free, more of him in a moment, and there was just little old me. And but I absolutely loved it, and enjoyed the parachuting stupidly. And when you're with dedicated blokes, it was a terrific command tour. I loved it, and I knew at that stage, being a CO, I probably wouldn't make, and I didn't. So therefore, I wanted probably for me, the ultimate command tour was going to be the battery commander's tour, and I knew that. So I had a fabulous time, and I hope everybody else did as well.
I mean, you say there that you probably knew you weren't going to make CO. I mean, so what was your prospects? Where did you have a choice in where you went? Is the question.
You mean after battery command?
Yeah.
Not really. I mean, you get choices, but of course, you leave regimental service and you've got staff jobs to do. So you've got to work out what staff job you'd be best at. Do you do something that pushes you and you can be in the limelight, which would be great, and you get promoted out of it. But if you mess up, you're going to be done forever. Or do you go for a really easy one, you have a great time, but no prospect for promotion? Or do you do something in the middle? So, I mean, I was never one for pushing myself to the far limits. I was in the army to enjoy being there, leading soldiers, being there, doing what I thought was good for the army. And I didn't sort of sell my soul, as it were, to try and do that and be above that and this, that, and the other. So that makes sense. And so, yeah, I mean, I just chose different staff jobs. But the battery commander's job, I got an extra year out of it because they were changing the reporting cycles. Absolutely perfect for me. So I had a chap called Chris Brown, who's my CO, ended up as Lieutenant General. He was Pebble Island and all the rest of it with 148. Terrific bloke. Still see him. I go cycling with him fairly regularly. And then Bill Moore, who I'd been a lieutenant with, and then he's suddenly my CO. Terrific bloke as well. So I knew these people pretty well, and it was actually I turned up in G Battery, and as an officer you are pensionable after you're 36. So I turned up in G Battery 37 years old, pensionable. I thought I didn't really think much of age in those days, but it was still between me and the BSM who'd come first on the BFT, and I thought that that's quite good. And I know people in the past said, right, you can't beat the CO, you can't the BC, you're on extra PT. Well, I just didn't say that. I just said, look, we're going for a run. I'm coming with you. I'd be interested to see how everybody gets on, that sort of thing. So I was still fit in those days. The injuries hadn't started kicking in, and I hadn't got my crate of Brufen issued to me just by then, and unlike now. But no, we had a really terrific time, and I really enjoyed working with predominantly two para and one para, who I supported. I did time with the Gurkhas as well, and we went off to Malaysia, Belize, Bosnia, Canada, America. And back in the day, you used to try and parachute with each of the other countries, and you get another set of wings, and it was like a game. It wasn't a game. And you try and get something that would be, unrecognisable by someone else. Because in those days, you used to wear your foreign wings on your smock. You could only wear one set on. So you put something on, and the ultimate thing was when another para would have to ask you where they were from.
I mean, I suppose that's quite. I have seen the lads wearing them now. Normally, the US airborne ones.
Yeah.
But I can imagine
3 times.
I can imagine going out to some of the countries and jumping with them. Let's say safety standards for the country could be a bit dubious, could it?
Interestingly enough, the most dubious jump story I've got is that I was actually in the MOD, and a mate of mine was running the parachuting in Aldershot, and Staff College were going to Poland for a trip, and they were going to Krakow. He said, "Do you want to come?" I said, "Yeah," because we're going to parachute with the Poles. I thought, brilliant. So I went off with, pretending I was like a Staff College student, which I wasn't. And that's when we went to, we were in Krakow. So we were visiting Auschwitz and all that sort of stuff. And we were living with the Slobolowski Brigade. Have you seen, listeners, you all know Market Garden and the film called
Bridge Too Far.
Bridge Too Far. The Polish Brigadier.
As soon as you said his name, I remembered it.
Slobolowski, by actor was Gene Hackman. Anyway, we were billeted in the Slobolowski Brigade, and on the brigade's square there is this bust of Brigadier Slobolowski. And I tell you what, it is identical to Gene Hackman. Absolutely every unbelievable coincidence, which is fantastic. Anyway, so we were, there we were with these guys, and we were going to go parachuting, and we had to do sort of ground training. which was, landing, and of course, being Polish, you not only landed, you then had to grab your knife, roll over, throw the knife, and all that sort of stuff. Parachute jump instructors from RAF were with us. They were looking at this and they were studying the equipment. I don't think so. And so they called jump off because it was a bit too hairy, which was a shame. But I did parachute with poles once later on. There can't be many of your listeners or interviewees that have parachuted into Ukraine.
I wouldn't have thought any.
No. Well, when the wall came down, there was this massive burst of energy of we've got to show allegiance with these countries. So there was this exercise that we were on, and I took my BC's party, an OP party, and a company of 2 para, and the CO of 2 para, I think it was. That was it. And we all flew over from Bryce into Ukraine, jumped in. So all our jeans and T-shirt, everything in your container, all your military kit. You're landing on the DZ, bang, in Ukraine. And this sort of passport official with his big hat saying, passport. You're trying to get your parachute down and make sure your weapon's not in the mud. Passport. So we then do that. And then we do this exercise where we've got a company of 2 para, a company of Ukraine, and a company of Poles. Many of the Ukrainians' senior staff are ex-Spetsnaz type, we're done with that now, but I'll tell you a few stories about it. So we had this battle group of 3 different countries' companies. Fascinating exercise. So much so that on the big final exercise, the big drop, defence ministers from all 3 countries turned up to watch and things like that. And, all those armoured vehicles that you and I have had to identify as part of a test. These were sort of landing next to you on the DZ and things like that. And the Hind helicopter came in and strafed the DZ first. Then we came in, and it was like a most realistic non-live battle with live ammunition you could ever be on. If that makes sense. And that was my parachuting into Ukraine. Oh, wait a minute.
There's some different headwear there, isn't there?
Well, I'm the only guy in a British smock. You can't really see it properly, but there I am.
Yeah.
And, but the coveted back in the day, the coveted blue and white stripy shirts of the Russian airborne were, and we had the most brilliant time with the Ukrainians. But literally, when we did do the jump, you could see and feel the heat from Chernobyl because we were down in that area, and some of the people we met, they were obviously all going to die long term of radiation poisoning. It was just so. So that was 7 time. We did some fantastic exercises. We've had some terrific. I think being a 2IC of a unit like that, where you're in charge of organising the exercise. The legend Jerry Ackhurst was a 2IC for a while. He was a BC 7 battery in the Falklands, and then he became 2IC of 7 when I was there. I mean, some of the exercises we did were just absolutely outrageously good, and it keeps you going.
You mentioned Staff College. Where did you do that?
I was excused Staff College. That's a phrase that the SAS used.
Right, okay.
I was excused Staff College because I was no good. So I didn't do Staff College. What happened for me was that you take an exam and I didn't get enough marks. I was allowed to take it again, didn't get enough marks. I'd take it again still. But they said, right, well, Staff College is normally 2 parts. You've got the technical bit at Shrivenham and then the academic leadership bit at Camberley. It's now all at Shrivenham. So they let me do the technical bit. So I became a weapons staff officer by doing that, which I thoroughly enjoyed because I was okay at that, science subjects and things. But I didn't then go on to Camberley. And so Luckily got the staff tick, as it were, to help with the career. Not that much, but and I learnt loads. And actually during that time, I got a chance to get a degree, which I didn't do because I thought the army. That was the thing I missed out earlier on. The army said, "Right, you can go and get your degree if you like, and come to the army later, the Santos later. But if you stay now, we'll send you, and you can get a BSc, a basic degree at Shrivenham." And when I left 2-9, I had a chance to either go flying or Shrivenham to get a degree. So I said, do I really want to get a degree with a bunch of signals and REME, specky, technical, people? Probably not. Much rather go flying back to Plymouth. And so I gave up my degree place, which would have been a spoon-fed free bachelor's degree. Idiot. Because then I got chucked off the flying course. No qualification at all. And it was only when I went to Shrivenham that I could make up. And I got the equivalent of a sort of a City and Guilds degree. And then they allowed me to go on the master's course, which meant that you did this and this. And then I had to write this great big dissertation that had to be published and stuff like that. Which I found thrilling for two reasons. One, I was proving to myself that I could actually be academic when I tried to. And two, I found the research. I was a bad reader, but I had to read and I had to learn things, and I found the research and then the whole writing thing fantastic. So, yeah.
And did that shape what you wanted to do afterwards as well? Or?
No, that was totally separate. So my dissertation was the value of the padre on the battlefield. And, I mean, that was shaped by the fact that most of my ancestors had all been vicars. My father was the first one not to be a vicar. He joined the army and then said he wanted to be an army vicar, but didn't become an army vicar. And so I was a religious background, and I'd seen what had gone on in the Falklands, seen what had gone on in Northern Ireland. I saw Bosnia, and I thought, you know what? There is something in this. And the padre of Two Power in Goose Green, a chap called Cooper, was a friend of mine. I mean, what a padre to have. He was a Bisley shot. He trained the sniper team. So, but he ended up being the OC of CCF at Eton College, I think. But I understood, and there's a lot more to. We mentioned it earlier about preparing yourself to do something out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
If you know you've got as much support, training, backup as possible. And so I explored that. And then back in the day, 1,000 years ago, probably longer, you were fighting normally for your god and your queen and whatever. And there'd be blessings, and padre, father, would be there. And so really interesting reading about that and exploring it, and then seeing how it comes to the modern day thing. And then I interviewed hundreds of different army padres and their view on where they should be. Should they be with the soldiers? You've seen them on exercise. They come and they pretend to build a trench, and they're not very good at it, but they're quite good at making tea or whatever, and linking that and just being there for someone to talk to. And whereas others are wanting just to, their job, they feel, is to be with the family and make sure that's safe so that the soldier can then get on and fight the battles and things without the worry. So it was really interesting to see where padres as a whole should be. And the other thing that came to light was when I was in 5 Airborne Brigade with Cedric Delves as the brigade commander, the SAS warrior. I was his G1 staff officer. And, if you're an SAS brigadier, you don't really care about G1, really. You don't need to. Someone does something wrong, you just stab them. And but my AO was all shot, and I tell you what, the amount of stuff going on G1 wise was massive. And so one of the things was religion and padres, and so I got the padres from Bagshot to come to visit 5 Airborne Brigade, because some of them were going to go and join regiments, And you know what it's like. You've got apologies, not prepared. So we were preparing them, and that's where I got to learn more about them and the value they would give, but only if they were ready and all that stuff. So that was my dissertation. But technically, as a weapons staff officer, which is what they had trained me at Charitable, it then meant I could go and do staff jobs which were technical. And my first one was in the MOD in London, where it was a procurement job, but it was the most terrific. I think probably the best staff job anybody could ever have. I was procuring non-lethal weaponry for the SF and the and IS community. Well, I probably can't talk about it here, but even though it's out now, but it was fantastic. So the new riot gun, baton gun.
Yeah,
I brought that in, joint project that I ran for the police and the army. Baton rounds aren't just plastic; they can be other things as well. Things like that. And, if you're in the pool and you're chasing a ship, you might need this, that, or the other. So that was my gear. It was terrific.
I mean, how different was like working in MOD?
Oh, very different.
I don't think I'd like it.
No, I don't think many of it. I think now maybe as you join the army, if you join the army now, you know that that's part of your career progression. I just wanted to be a, platoon commander, troop commander, battery commander, FOA. All I wanted to do. Deal with the blokes, go on exercise, run, get dirty, shoot, that sort of stuff, and if possible, go on ops. There weren't that many of those. And so you didn't want to be sitting behind a desk at all.
Well, when you get to a certain level, you've got to expect that. And
I know, but only if you're clever enough to realise. Not me. I didn't know. And so, then it dawns on you. You think, well, do you know what? I don't really want to stay in this army. I'll leave. And if I've only got staff jobs left, that's not really me. And then there was, I realised that because I didn't do staff college, I realised that being a commanding officer probably wasn't going to work for me. Sadly, I'd love to have been a CO, and but being 2IC would have been fantastic, and I'd love to have been 2IC of 29 or 7. But I was given the opportunity after some of the staff jobs to be Artillery Brigade Chief of Staff, and instead of a 2IC's tour, I thought, that'd be good. That's really interesting because you've got so many different. I had stay behind OPs, and I had back in the day when we had Phoenix, and the mix of MRS and UAV and all that stuff. So I had all those funnies together, and we were part of the arc, and there was that bigger picture. So I did Chief of Staff of 1 Artillery Brigade, which I felt really rewarding because you were learning so much and doing stuff. And I also thought that might give me a tick. Didn't give me much of a tick, but I probably enjoyed it too much. And so that was where it was going. And then after that, a few more staff jobs, and then eventually probably the oldest person ever to be selected for promotions, Lieutenant Colonel. Hey, got it. And quick, don't look round. Don't look surprised. And I don't know what was the thrill. I think the fact that I'd overtaken my dad was quite a big deal for me because he retired as a major, as most of us normally do. And so I overtook my dad, and I felt pretty good about that. And I did a couple of really good jobs as the SO1. And it was the time of. Do you remember in Deep Cut? There was I think 3 suicides. Which wasn't good back in about 2006. And the army said to the government, right, leave it, we'll sort this out. And it's obviously something to do with our training and this and the other. And what they identified was that we didn't train our trainers to be trainers. You would go to Lark Hill or whatever because you were a good gun number 1. You would go and teach map reading because you were good at map reading. You would do Fizz because you were fit. But they didn't actually teach them the pedology or whatever it is of educating and understanding students' requirements and things like that. So I had a procurement job in ARTD in the training headquarters, doing something really dull. And they suddenly had promised the government, they said, right, we'll solve this in the next 12 months. And so they said, right, we need someone who's not doing much. Well, that'll be Bates then. And your project is to solve the deep cut crisis problem. So we ummed and ahed and worked out what we needed to do, which was basically consolidate training of trainers and give them all the skills they needed to train soldiers better. To train instructors better. So it was train the trainer thing.
Yeah.
And in that 1 year, I managed to move the drill school out of Pirbright up to Catterick. That was, nearly a death wish. I managed to take over their accommodation. I managed to build extra accommodation and an all ranks training environment where we would then send anybody who is going to be posted into a phase 1 or phase 2 training slot, then had to come and do our 5-week course of Train the Trainer, which was a massive success. So much so that Sandhurst, who were looking down their nose, eventually, I think, joined the program and things like that. And then they said, right, well, write the spec for the CO. And so I was doing the job spec and stuff. And I said, well, really, this needs to be a senior lieutenant colonel, perhaps someone who's had command experience, because he then understands, because his soldiers would be, he'd be sending his soldiers. So I wrote this job spec. They said, oh, that's a pity, because we were going to make you the CO, but you just so I did temporary CO.
You just wrote yourself out of a job, yeah.
of the Army Staff Leadership School, which also included inventing the crest, which I think is still there. And they probably think it's a really important old Latin thing. Actually, serpent for wisdom, shepherd's crook, a bit like Ian Jury, CRA in the Gulf, for shepherding, and then battle axe for action, and then and red and black means something as well. Yeah, so spent hours on cartoons on that, but also managed to run the syllabus and pretend to be a CO. So that was one of the staff jobs, and and then my final...
I mean, you go. So my like half ate me. My 10 pence on that.
Yeah.
We as old as Sweats. As I
both of us. That both of us.
Yeah. Training was a lot harder in my day. Type of thing. And everybody says that I was very lucky. I went to junior leaders in '85, and I had some fantastic, instructors there. The 3 sergeants we had in the end who were there, and the troop TSN, Julian Fox, absolutely brilliant guy. I remember my training fondly. Right. I've spoken to other guys who went to juniors at the same time as me, or just before or after, who didn't have the same experience that I did. And again, it's down to the people who are there looking. They're not, like you touched on just now. Then they're not just training you; they're looking after you. And as you go in somewhere as a recruit, you dull-eyed, you haven't got a clue what's going on, and they break you down to nothing and bring you back up in their mould. And I don't think people realise how much of a responsibility that is, or we didn't used to realise how much of a responsibility that is.
I think you're encompassing everything that we then tried to train people to understand.
Yeah.
And, once a potential trainer during his training realises that he or she will have the influence on a student, a young gunner or young private soldier, to the extent that, you will mould their training and their life. As long as you keep in your own mind and focus that you want that trainee to be good enough for you to command, then you've cracked it. And if you keep that as a thing, right, I want everybody to be as good at the end of this training session as I would want posted into my gun sub, CP, whatever it might be. And if you can focus on that, then I think all of us as trainers will do a fantastic job.
So, I mean, was this coming up to the end of your time in the army? Because you worked with the reserves afterwards, didn't you?
Yeah. Okay. What happened next? Did a quick tour as this is. I was in the MOD for a bit and in Bristol, desperate to get out. I'd done 2 years, and wasn't going to get a better report. I was trying to get promoted to lieutenant colonel, and 2-6 regiment was short of a 2IC, and they were on Optelic 3, I think. And so someone said, who wants to be do you want to be a temporary 2IC? I said, yeah, definitely temporary 2IC. And I went as battle group chief of staff to 2-6 on Telic 3, which was just phenomenal because, well, several reasons. We had about 7 subunits, and it included 2 paras snipers and recce, and it had the gun batteries, but also some other bits and pieces, everything. And the CO was Julian Free, Lieutenant General. He was a CO then, but I'd handed G battery over to him as majors. He was junior, and now he was the CO, and he was the most terrific bloke you could possibly ask for. And he was after a slightly long in the tooth, calmer, 2IC major type person, just to keep all the sort of things ticking over. So I went as battle group chief of staff, which I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed. Didn't mean I could get out of the ops room much, which was a pity. But then to see, firsthand how we were now operating in Telic, and there were pretty much nightly raids and things like that we were running from the ops room. I mean, I really enjoyed that. And then after that, it was staff jobs the whole way through. So last staff job was the training trials planning office. So you've got ARTDU, the Army Royal Artillery Trials Development Unit.
Yeah.
You've got one of those trials units in each arm and service. So Infantry Trials Development Unit and so on. So they get given their jobs by the trials planning officer, an army role, which worked for Headquarters Army, which was me. And so if the new sniper rifle was coming in, it would need to be trialled. I'd say, that'll have to be the ITDU. Or if the new boots came in, that'll have to be everybody trialling it, and that sort of stuff. So we'd run a trials program for every new bit of kit that came in and decide whether it should stay, which was really quite an exciting period because Afghanistan was kicking off. Mine warfare and anti-mine was really important. So I got trips to Jordan with the Royal Engineers and things like that. It was really exciting because instead of the procurement boys taking 2 or 3 years to build something, then it to be tested for another year, then it to be used in practice by soldiers, and then eventually to be brought into service, 5-year cycle. This was all, it was being built, experimented, trialled, and PDT all in the same couple of months in Jordan, because the earth and the sand and the rock very similar to Afghanistan. And we did some absolutely fantastic trials and stuff like that. And I thought, right, I don't think I can get a better job than this. Not as a staff job. I'm going to end up as some smelly old lieutenant colonel somewhere. So I decided to leave. I could have stayed on another year. Decided to leave. And I didn't have a clue what to do and sought advice. I thought, well, people like me end up as a school bursar in a private school. So I put my name down to try and get that. And my secret weapon was I'm an FA qualified football coach, and because I used to run a football team back home, and another friend of mine, also FA coach, was a deputy head at a big school in Bath. I thought, great, I use him as my referee. That's reference referee rather than beep beep penalty. And about a year later, he wrote to me and said, Peter, no one's come to me for any references. Are you still after a job? I said, yeah, don't embarrass me. Yeah, I am. It's just that no one's ever offered me anything. He said, well, our school, and he was the boys' grammar school in Bath, we're after a sort of bursar, but without doing the sums and all that sort of stuff. But, to make the money and explore new avenues, because they just become an academy. And then, rather than a state school, you can then run your own budget. And that sounded interesting, and he was keen to get me on board. And so long story short, I then got a job, first job out of the army, thinking this was fantastic. I worked for the girls' grammar school and the boys' grammar school in Bath, making them money, basically. I wasn't a teacher. I was their development director, their commercial guy, which was fantastic because if you look at most schools with orchestra, cricket nets, football fields, tennis courts, computer labs, art studios, they're all shut from 5 o'clock till 8 o'clock every day. They're all shut from 4:30 Friday till 8 a.m. Monday. So you can, by using all of that, it was quite obvious you could make loads of money. And of course, academies can do that. So I set to a number of works of project work. It didn't work. And the deal was I had to make my own annual wage the first year and had to double it the second. 18 months into it, 3 million quid to the better. So I thought I'd nailed this. And I got called in, and I was working for 2 head teachers and 2 chair of governors boards. And they called me, and I thought they were going to be a massive slap on the back. And they said, "Oh, you've done a really good job. We can let you go now." And I think, I don't know whether I'm the same as everybody else, but when I left the army, which had been really my main job ever, I just thought I'd have one more job, and then I'd stop. And then I thought this would be it for whatever, because I was cycling to work, into Bath, because I was living nearby. And it was brilliant. I was doing something quite successfully, making lots of money, making people happy, getting paid, having my own, benefits as well. And they said, "Yeah, it's really good, well done, but we don't need you anymore." I thought, shit, you buggers, what's all that about? And so they chucked me out. And basically, last in, first out when they were pruning down. They got all this money in and they didn't need me anymore. And I thought that was really bad form and I didn't like it. But as a safety net, when I left the regulars, by the way out there, if you're in the regulars and you haven't left yet, join the reserves the day you leave, because all the mats and everything just follows over and you get full bounty the first year. So I joined the reserves, NRHQ RA, based in Woolwich, staff officer pool of people. And it basically meant you could go out on a weekend and drink and shoot and all that, a bit of staff work. But also act as a watchkeeper if anything came up, like the floods in Somerset or Novichok or something like that. So I thought that was quite good fun. It kept you going. You still got the free clothes. And I thought, shit, I've got no job. And I was moaning about that on one of these NRHQ open days, and the guy said, "Well, we're after somebody in headquarters Southwest. We need a TA bloke, reservist bloke, to run a thing called 10 Tours." I thought, 10 Tours? Do you mean that epic youngsters trek across Dartmoor once a year, probably the biggest and most adventurous outdoor event that youngsters do in Britain? And they said, "Yeah, that's the one." I said, "I'm your man." And so I moved into HQ Southwest as a reservist lieutenant colonel, old and all that sort of stuff, and ran 10 tours and had an absolute ball. It was fantastic. And then part of the engagement team when that came in and things like that. But then, of course, the TA kicks you out because you look too stupid in uniform after 60. And so I knew I had to get a proper job after that. In between times, I'd been recruited into the Somerset ACF. They were short of a commandant. And to be honest, I didn't know much about Army cadets at all. I'd been a Lance Corporal in the CCF at school and then nothing in cadets. But I'll tell you, the ACF in Britain is unbelievable. The dedication of the adult volunteers, the absolute, keenness of every single youngster, boy and girl who joined, and the clever way that the senior child cadets look after the youngsters. I mean, I was absolutely amazed and honoured to be part of it. And they gave me full colonel, so that went on the Maroon Berry. Oh, hello, and you could get paid, but if you took a colonel's wage for the day, then that meant 5 adult volunteers would be short of money by the end of the month. So got the petrol paid, had 36 platoons, I think it was, in Somerset. So I didn't have a single free evening or weekend, but absolutely loved it. I mean, I just thrived off the energy that the little ones and the big ones gave me, and I can't praise them enough. Anyway, so that all came to an end when I then realised I had to get a proper job after getting to 60. And that's when I joined the Army Benevolent Fund, because they needed someone to run the Southwest. So that's when I got into the charity work.
I mean, since I've been doing the podcast, excuse me, I've never really been involved with any of the Army Benevolent Fund or any of them at all. Really, I had no interest in any of the charities, or I think a lot of us, when we leave the military, we forget that there's things there to help us if we need. And we too tend, you've still got that mindset as there's fucking no wrong. I can look after myself, type of thing.
Yeah.
But you don't, you don't have to do it on your own.
Well,
There's charities out there.
Sorry to interrupt, Craig. What I would say is that if you and I feel we don't need it for ourselves, what's critical is that we know about it, so we can help other people. And you're absolutely right. There's too much pride out there to, for people to think they need it. But what we can do is recognise where other people need it, perhaps. So learn about it, and on resettlement, for goodness sake, understand what's there. And in the Army Benevolent Fund, don't know whether you know the background, but it was something like 1945. Winston Churchill's having a bit of a think about what's going to happen at the end of the war. And he said, well, we don't want the same thing to happen like back last time. Broken people came home and all that stuff. We need something to look after. So it was born straight after the war, and with a view of looking after people who came back, or looking after the families that didn't have a breadwinner. And it hasn't really changed. It's still there, for soldiers, their families, their dependents, and it's for life. So people, and it's having been in this military, as we have for so long, to know that it's there, and then actually to have been part of the ABF where you're able to help those people. I wasn't dishing out the money. My job in the Southwest to bring it in, hand it to London, and they're the ones that distributed the grants. But you really did feel it was a worthy thing to do, and it was a real delight to be part of it.
I mean, how can I put this? There's a feeling, and I've discovered this since I started doing the podcast, there's a feeling, especially, there's some very salty veterans out there, put it that way. And there's some very, this might be an unpopular phrase, with some veterans, there's a sense of entitlement, unfortunately. But I think that's just down to human nature. But the majority of veterans out there, they try and keep themselves to themselves. They don't try and get involved. And when they do, I mean, you've got stuff like Up Courage. I went through Up Courage myself. It worked for me. It was fantastic. But a lot of people don't know where to go.
Yeah.
And they're scared of people like what we call the Big Four. I won't say the names on here, but you can imagine who they are. Because there's that many horror stories about people approaching them and getting turned away that you end up going to the smaller organisations, the local organisations, which there is many, but there's many spring up and close because they haven't got the funding. Yeah. I mean, I was involved with the Eastern Veterans Trust, and I will sing their praises till the cows come home. They were absolutely fantastic with me, and I signpost everyone who comes to me. I signpost them straight there to them, and they take referrals on the phone. You don't have to go through Up Courage or anything like that. And there's lots of these little charities and CICs out there that I think there's a danger of them getting lost in the wilderness. There's a lot of people that start things up with good intention, but can't keep it going. I mean,
you only need to go to the Bath and West show or the Bournemouth Air show, and you see all the different stands, and they've all got a really good reason to be there for widows or for mental health or whatever it might be. But they're all doing good, but there is only a certain amount of money. Now, I know that the ABF, being the big granddaddy of it all, will often support those. But I get where you're coming from. Perhaps there's too many. I don't know. But that's not to say don't invent a new one because you can see that you can help these people. You must keep helping. And I felt that the ABF has been around for so long. They've got a lot of money and they are doing a lot of good. But you've got to be a bit careful because if you're sitting in London and you've got to be able to see where the need is most needed. And that's why when we spoke a bit about your projects earlier, this would be superb to support veterans generally on that.
Yeah. Right, it's been 2 hours. I bet you didn't expect that.
Whipped past. I haven't even told you what I'm doing now.
I was going to say.
Have you
I
got
wasn't, it's been 2 hours. I said, what are your plans for the future?
So I was headhunted out of the ABF by my son, who runs a large martial arts firm globally. And he's turned it more into, rather than just kicking and punching, a sort of character development thing. And he and I had a long chat, and we thought, well, hang on a minute. You're getting rich kids in the UAE, rich kids in the UK, signing up through Taekwondo, doing this, that, and the other. And it's terrific. But what about all the poor people in the world? If it's a character development thing, what about the underprivileged kids, the orphans, people in ghettos and things? And we agreed that we ought to have a charity. So what I did after the ABF was set up and started running a thing called Debates Foundation, which takes the martial arts, does it in orphanages, takes classes. So I organise instructors all over the world. We started in East Coast Africa, Kenya. We went to Nepal. We did other countries in Kenya. Where the real slums of the world are. Rio de Janeiro, Fiji, where they've got problems, Sri Lanka. And we set up these weekly training sessions. So people get it for nothing. The school or the orphanage allows us to run it. So nobody gets any money for that. The instructors, the only ones get paid. And it brings these kids a sense of unity, a sense of purpose. It gives them more focus, gets them to concentrate. And basically, for these kids who've had nothing, they come out of this program as they leave the orphanage or the school, or they're better people. So that was a fantastic job to have done, and that's now running. I think we've got about 3,000 kids all over the world, which is fantastic.
Wow.
But it was 9 days a week, 6 different time zones, 28 hours a day. You couldn't make it up. So then when I got my state pension, I thought it's time to stop all that. And so my new venture is to set up a more casual but equally important battlefield tour business. I'm going to take people to D-Day Normandy and Western Front Flanders and help educate, help explain, help people understand what's going on all over there. And it's not on a website yet, but Honour and Legacy, when you re-interview me, will be something you'll want everybody to know about.
I've got a friend who does that. I've had him on the podcast, Vern Littley.
Oh, I know Vern, yeah.
Yeah,
the Guild
he's
of Battle
passionate.
Guys. Yeah,
he's passionate about it.
I mean, he's doing it pretty much full time, I think. I mean, I just want to take select groups, take them around. My grandfather, maternal grandfather, he did Sword Beach with the Suffolks, attacked Hillman, died on D-Day. It's all pretty serious to me. I can tell when I'm with people, and I've done tours with youngsters and adults, I can tell them what it's like. I've done my own D-Day, and I want to bring all that to life. I want them to understand. And, bespoke tours. In April, I'm taking a family to Yeats and the Somme. Cycling chum of mine, his mum, who's 90, her dad fought on the Somme, lied about his age as a 16-year-old, joined up the Durham Light Infantry, fought in the Somme, survived, which makes it a bit awkward when you're doing research, because if they die, you know where they were and what they did. But he survived and the rest of it. So I'm taking them on a retrace their footsteps tour, and I'm finding it fascinating, and what they're going to learn on the day is just going to blow their mind. I find it really well.
When I was interviewing him, and he was telling me about the research that he's had to do.
Yeah.
And they found graves that that people didn't know was there and stuff, and and it's just it's. I think that history should never die.
Well, I think in the back of my mind, I know all that, and that's probably in the back of my mind why I want to do it. I mean, I've taken youngsters. So during my military time, I linked up with a school teacher, and we took at half term. We'd take the whole class by bike get them onto the ferry, start at Southwark House, where the D-Day planning room is, explain to them about that. These are sort of 14-year-olds or whatever. And then they'd get onto the ferry at Portsmouth with their bike and their panniers at about 11 o'clock at night, overnight ferry, sleeping on the ground. And then the ramp would come down. It was a bit like D-Day. But we'd cycle into the area of Oosthuizen and Caen. And depending on their age, we'd either drop the kid at a campsite or keep it with us. And we'd give them a week of fizz on the bike, a week of linguistic things that would make them all speak French, a week of cooking for themselves, looking after themselves, and a week of history. All of that in a week. And we suddenly realised that instead of just giving them that time away a half term, the parents should be, and we did it at a cost, how much it would cost and campsites and stuff. And we suddenly thought, this is stupid, we should be doing it as a business. And our aim was to make sure as many people had seen the D-Day landings before the next big anniversary. So that actually meant more. It was more fundamental to them when they were watching it on telly because they'd been there, they'd felt it. So, and that's what I want to do. And I'm going to dedicate the next 10 years to that.
I mean, it's amazing how quickly people forget. Not World War I, World War II. I'm on about more recent conflicts.
Oh, right, okay.
If I mention to the guys at work, I mean, they're both mid-20s, and they know nothing about Bosnia, right? They know nothing about Kosovo. They know nothing about the Troubles. They know nothing about Malaya. They know nothing about Korea. And it's, and I've said it many times on the podcast. But the one that guiles me is Bosnia.
Yeah.
That was the two that actually meant something to me. I wanted to go there. I can't
agree with you more. I think the closest I've ever come to having anything like PTSD is, you rock up at an orphanage in Bosnia and you see the state of things. There's no money, there's no medicine, there's no adults, and you've just got these kids that have just been ruined by the war. And there's very little you can do. I mean, it's just, and when I was in Bosnia, I was having, my third child had just been born. It was that close and that raw to me, so it was horrible.
I imagine. Right, I think we'll call it a night there.
Good Lord.
Yeah, it was longer than you thought, wasn't it?
Yeah. Do the clocks go forward?
I do think that we might get you back on again because I think you've got a lot more stories. Yeah, we'll see. Right, I'd like to say thank you for coming on. It's been wholeheartedly entertaining. You've had such a varied career that we've only just scratched the surface of it.
I mean, you're a brilliant interviewer because I wouldn't have thought anybody could get me talking for that long, and you've achieved that. I just hope it hasn't been too basic, but I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, frankly. It's been brilliant.
Right, thank you very much for coming on. I'll stop the recording.
All right.
Stop. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that'd be great because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully we'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.